August 11th, 1940, 7:15 in the morning, 26,000 feet above Dover, England. Squadron leader Adolphe Malan banked his Supermarine Spitfire into a shallow dive, watching a formation of German Dornier bombers approaching the English coast far below. What he was about to demonstrate violated every tactical doctrine taught by RAF Fighter Command. The prescribed formation flying rules called his planned maneuver stupidly reckless and tactically unsound. Yet in the next 45 minutes, this South African merchant seaman would prove that sometimes breaking every rule could make a fighter pilot absolutely unhittable. The story of how Sailor Malan revolutionized aerial combat begins not with military training, but with years of watching albatrosses soar effortlessly around merchant ships crossing the South Atlantic. Born Adolphe Gisbert Malan in Wellington, Cape Province, on March 24, 1910, he joined the South African training ship General Botha as 15-year-old cadet number 168. His nickname, Sailor, came from subsequent service with the Union Castle shipping line, where he learned to read weather patterns, wind currents, and the subtle movements of birds that could predict changes in atmospheric conditions hours before they occurred. These maritime skills would prove invaluable when Malan joined the Royal Air Force in 1935 at age 25, just under the maximum age limit for short service commissions. Unlike pilots who had trained from adolescence, Malan brought unconventional perspectives to aerial warfare. He understood that successful flying required reading environmental signs that most airmen ignored. Wind shears, cloud formations, and atmospheric pressure changes could be exploited tactically by pilots who recognized their significance. Malan's early RAF career with No. 74 Squadron at Hornchurch was marked by technical competence rather than exceptional skill. His instructors noted methodical flying techniques and adequate gunnery scores, but nothing suggested the tactical genius that would emerge during combat operations. Fellow pilots remember him as serious, disciplined, and unusually focused on understanding aircraft performance, characteristics under various flight conditions. The transformation began during the Dunkirk evacuation in May 1940, when 74 Squadron flew combat patrols over German bomber formations attacking the evacuation beaches. Standard RAF tactical doctrine emphasized tight Vic formations of 3 aircraft flying wingtip to wingtip, maintaining visual contact while approaching enemy formations in coordinated attacks. These formations looked impressive during peacetime exercises, but proved catastrophically vulnerable against experienced German fighter pilots using tactics developed during the Spanish Civil War. German pilots flew in loose swarm formations of 4 aircraft arranged in a finger pattern that provided mutual support while maintaining tactical flexibility. When British Vics encountered German swarms, the rigid RAF formations were easily outmaneuvered and often destroyed without achieving meaningful results against their targets. Malan witnessed these disasters repeatedly during Dunkirk operations and began developing alternative approaches that challenged fundamental assumptions about formation flying. The critical insight came from observing how individual German pilots maneuvered when separated from their formations. Unlike British pilots who had been trained to maintain prescribed positions regardless of tactical circumstances, German airmen used fluid positioning that adapted constantly to changing combat conditions. They climbed when altitude provided advantages, dove when speed was needed, and turned when maneuverability offered tactical benefits. Most importantly, they never flew predictable patterns that enemy pilots could anticipate and exploit. Malan began experimenting with similar techniques during training flights, testing how Spitfire performance characteristics could be optimized through unconventional flying methods. He discovered that rapid altitude changes could confuse pursuing aircraft, that unexpected direction reversals could cause overshooting attacks, and that varying airspeeds could create tactical opportunities unavailable to pilots following standard procedures. These experiments formed the foundation for combat techniques that would revolutionize British fighter tactics. The development of what would become the continuous turning technique required months of systematic testing and refinement. Malan studied German combat films captured from downed aircraft analyzing the precise maneuvering patterns that made Luftwaffe pilots so effective against traditional British formations. He noticed that successful German attacks relied on predictable target behavior, with pilots calculating interception courses based on expected flight paths. Working with his most experienced flight commanders, Malan developed training exercises that emphasized unpredictable maneuvering while maintaining formation integrity. Pilots practiced rapid direction changes timed to coincide with enemy firing passes, learning to recognize the subtle visual cues that indicated when opponents were committed to specific attack vectors. The training was physically demanding, requiring exceptional fitness to withstand the G-forces generated by continuous maneuvering. The key breakthrough came when Malan realized that traditional energy management principles could be modified to support sustained evasive action. Instead of conserving energy for specific tactical maneuvers, pilots could use continuous gentle turns that maintained airspeed while creating unpredictable flight paths. The technique required precise throttle control and elevator inputs to maintain optimal performance while denying enemy pilots stable tracking solutions. Malan's analysis of Spitfire aerodynamic characteristics revealed that the aircraft's elliptical wing design provided exceptional maneuverability at moderate speeds, particularly in the altitude ranges where most combat occurred. The wing's efficiency enabled sustained turning without catastrophic energy loss, making continuous maneuvering tactically viable. German aircraft optimized for high-speed performance often struggled to match Spitfire agility in turning engagements. The psychological aspects of continuous turning proved as important as the physical advantages. German pilots trained to expect predictable British responses found themselves constantly adjusting firing solutions against targets that refused to behave according to established patterns. This created mental stress and reduced accuracy, while British pilots gained confidence from their ability to avoid enemy fire through skillful maneuvering rather than passive defensive measures. The first operational test occurred on June 18, 1940, during a night interception mission over Essex. German bombers were attacking targets along the Thames estuary under bright moonlight conditions that provided excellent visibility for defensive operations. Malan encountered a Heinkel bomber caught in searchlight beams at 8,000 feet and attacked using unconventional approach angles that minimized his exposure to defensive fire while maximizing accuracy of his own gunnery. Instead of following prescribed rear-quarter attack procedures, Malan approached from below and slightly ahead of the bomber, using the aircraft's blind spot to achieve optimal firing position before the German crew could react. The attack succeeded brilliantly, destroying the bomber with a 4-second firing burst from 50 yards range. Minutes later, Malan repeated the technique against a second bomber at 12,000 feet, demonstrating that unconventional tactics could achieve consistent results rather than occasional lucky hits. These successes established Malan's reputation as an innovative tactician, but more importantly, they validated his belief that rigid adherence to prescribed formations and attack patterns limited pilot effectiveness against adaptable opponents. German tactics evolved constantly based on combat experience, while British doctrine remained static despite mounting evidence of its inadequacy. Malan began developing systematic approaches to aerial combat that emphasized adaptability over conformity. The breakthrough came during the early phases of the Battle of Britain, when Malan was promoted to command 74 Squadron in August 1940. Rather than impose traditional formation discipline, he encouraged pilots to experiment with flexible positioning that could adapt to changing tactical circumstances. The key innovation was abandoning the Vic formation entirely in favor of looser finger-four arrangements that provided mutual support while enabling individual initiative. More revolutionary was Malan's development of what became known as the continuous turning technique. Traditional dogfighting doctrine emphasized maintaining straight and level flight whenever possible, to preserve energy for specific tactical maneuvers. Malan argued that this approach made aircraft predictable targets for skilled opponents. Instead, he advocated constant course changes that made interception calculations impossible while creating unpredictable engagement opportunities. The technique required exceptional pilot skill and thorough understanding of aircraft performance limitations. Continuous turning consumed energy rapidly and could leave aircraft vulnerable if executed incorrectly. However, properly implemented, it created a defensive envelope around the aircraft that made accurate gunnery extremely difficult while maintaining offensive capabilities. German pilots found themselves constantly adjusting firing solutions against targets that refused to maintain predictable flight paths. Malan's tactical philosophy was codified in his famous 10 Rules for Airfighting, which became standard doctrine throughout RAF Fighter Command. The rules emphasized aggressive tactics, individual initiative, and constant vigilance, while maintaining formation integrity for mutual support. Most importantly, they specified that pilots should never fly straight and level for more than 30 seconds in combat areas, ensuring continuous tactical unpredictability. The effectiveness of these innovations was demonstrated dramatically on August 11, 1940, during what became known as Sailors' August the 11th. German intelligence had identified RAF Hockinge and Limpny airfields as priority targets for destruction, launching coordinated attacks throughout the day that tested British defensive capabilities. 74 Squadron was scrambled repeatedly to intercept incoming raids, providing multiple opportunities to test Malan's tactical innovations under combat conditions. The day began before dawn with intelligence reports indicating massive German preparations for coordinated attacks against Fighter Command airfields in Kent. Radar stations along the coast detected the first formations assembling over Calais at 0630 hours, with subsequent waves building throughout the morning. The scale of the operation exceeded previous German efforts, requiring maximum response from available British squadrons. The first interception occurred at 0715 hours, when radar stations detected a large German formation approaching Dover at high altitude. Malin led 12 Spitfires in a climbing intercept that positioned his squadron above the incoming bombers while maintaining tactical flexibility for immediate engagement. Instead of approaching in traditional Vic formations, the Spitfires deployed in loose finger 4 elements that could adapt quickly to changing tactical circumstances. The German formation consisted of 36 Dornier Do 17 bombers, escorted by approximately 40 Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters, flying at 24,000 feet. Traditional RAF doctrine would have required coordinated squadron attacks from behind and below, exposing British aircraft to concentrated defensive fire while providing German escorts with tactical advantages. Malin chose instead to execute diving attacks from multiple directions simultaneously, creating confusion and preventing coordinated German responses. As the formations merged, Malin demonstrated the continuous turning technique that made his aircraft virtually unhittable. German fighter escorts attempting to engage his Spitfire found themselves constantly adjusting firing angles against a target that changed direction unpredictably every few seconds. Meanwhile, Malan maintained offensive pressure through brief firing passes that achieved hits before German pilots could establish tracking solutions. The engagement lasted 18 minutes and resulted in the destruction of 6 German aircraft with no British losses. More importantly, the German formation was scattered and forced to abandon its bombing mission without reaching primary targets. Malin's tactical innovations had achieved decisive results that traditional approaches could not have accomplished against experienced German pilots using proven combat techniques. The second major engagement occurred at 10:45 hours when another large German formation approached Canterbury at medium altitude. This raid included 50 Heinkel He-111 bombers with heavy fighter escort, representing the largest daylight attack yet mounted against British targets. 74 Squadron, refueled and rearmed after the morning engagement, intercepted the formation using refined versions of the tactics proven earlier. Malan divided his squadron into 3 4-aircraft sections, each approaching from different directions to maximize tactical confusion. The lead section attacked from above and ahead, forcing German bombers into evasive maneuvers that disrupted formation integrity. The second section engaged escort fighters using continuous turning techniques that prevented effective German counterattacks. The third section maintained altitude advantage to counter any German reinforcements. The complexity of this multi-directional attack demonstrated how Milan's innovations could be scaled from individual aircraft techniques to coordinated squadron operations. German pilots found themselves facing simultaneous threats from multiple directions, making unified response impossible, while creating numerous opportunities for British pilots to achieve firing solutions against confused opponents. The final engagement of the day occurred at 16:20 hours when German forces mounted a desperate attempt to complete their original mission objectives. A mixed formation of Junkers, Ju-88 dive bombers, and Messerschmitt escorts approached Hawkinge Airfield at low altitude, hoping to achieve surprise through unconventional routing. 74 Squadron intercepted over Canterbury, initiating the day's most intense combat sequence. The success was repeated throughout the day as 74 Squadron engaged subsequent raids using similar tactics. By evening, the squadron had claimed 38 German aircraft destroyed, establishing August 11th as one of the most successful single-day performances by any RAF unit during the Battle of Britain. The achievement validated Milan's tactical philosophy and demonstrated that innovative approaches could overcome apparent technological or numerical disadvantages. The psychological impact extended beyond immediate tactical results. German pilots who encountered Milan's squadron reported frustration at their inability to establish effective gunnery solutions against continuously maneuvering British aircraft. Traditional German tactics emphasized disciplined formation attacks that relied on predictable enemy responses. When British pilots refused to behave predictably, German tactical advantages were significantly reduced. The continuous turning technique spread rapidly throughout fighter command as other squadrons observed its effectiveness and requested instruction in its application. Milan personally trained numerous squadron leaders and flight commanders, emphasizing that successful implementation required thorough understanding of aircraft limitations and exceptional pilot skill. The technique could not be applied mechanically, but demanded constant adaptation to specific tactical circumstances. German countermeasures developed gradually as Luftwaffe tacticians analyzed British innovations and developed responses designed to neutralize their effectiveness. These included coordinated attacks by multiple aircraft that forced continuous turners to choose between maintaining evasive maneuvers and defending against converging threats. However, British pilots adapted their techniques correspondingly, maintaining tactical advantages through superior training and equipment familiarity. The first German response involved modifying attack patterns to account for unpredictable British maneuvering. Luftwaffe pilots began using wider spacing during attack runs, providing more time to adjust firing solutions against turning targets. Squadron formations were restructured to include dedicated aircraft responsible for countering evasive British fighters, while other elements concentrated on primary targets. More sophisticated countermeasures emerged as German intelligence analyzed captured British aircraft and interrogated downed pilots. The Luftwaffe developed coordinated pincer attacks designed to force continuously turning aircraft into predetermined engagement zones where concentrated fire could overwhelm evasive capabilities. These tactics required exceptional coordination and timing, but proved effective against inexperienced British pilots, who relied too heavily on maneuvering without maintaining situational awareness. Milan countered these developments by emphasizing the importance of mutual support within squadron formations. Individual aircraft using continuous turning remained vulnerable to coordinated attacks, but properly coordinated sections could protect each other while maintaining tactical flexibility. The key was communication discipline that enabled pilots to share threat information while executing independent evasive maneuvers. The tactical evolution continued throughout 1941, as both sides developed increasingly sophisticated approaches to aerial combat. German pilots learned to anticipate British maneuvering patterns and developed firing techniques optimized for deflection shots against turning targets. British pilots refined their continuous turning methods to include altitude changes and speed variations that made interception calculations even more difficult. The introduction of improved German aircraft types, particularly the Focke-Wulf FW-190, forced additional modifications to Milan's techniques. The FW-190's superior high-speed performance enabled new attack patterns that could overwhelm traditional continuous turning defenses. British pilots learned to use terrain features and cloud cover to supplement evasive maneuvering, creating defensive combinations that remained effective against improved German capabilities. Training programs throughout Fighter Command incorporated lessons learned from this tactical evolution. New pilots received instruction in advanced maneuvering techniques, while experienced squadron leaders attended specialized courses on coordinating continuous turning tactics with other squadron operations. The training emphasized adaptability and situational awareness rather than mechanical application of prescribed techniques. The long-term impact of Milan's innovations extended far beyond the Battle of Britain to influence fighter tactics throughout the war and into the jet age. The emphasis on individual initiative within coordinated formations became standard doctrine for air forces worldwide. The principle that predictable flying created vulnerability influenced aircraft design and pilot training programs for decades after the war ended. During the Korean War, jet fighter pilots adapted Milan's continuous turning principles for high-speed combat at altitudes far beyond World War II operational ranges. The fundamental concept of denying enemy pilots stable tracking solutions remained valid despite dramatically different aircraft performance characteristics. American pilots flying F-86 Sabres against MiG-15 fighters employed variations of continuous turning that could be traced directly to techniques pioneered by Milan over the English Channel. The Vietnam conflict saw further evolution of these tactics as pilots adapted continuous maneuvering principles for combat against surface-to-air missiles and radar-guided weapons systems. The ability to maintain unpredictable flight paths became even more critical when facing guided weapons that could track conventional evasive maneuvers. Modern pilots learned to combine traditional turning techniques with electronic countermeasures and terrain masking to create defensive envelopes similar to those Milan had achieved through pure flying skill. Contemporary fighter aircraft incorporate advanced flight control systems that enable sustained maneuvering capabilities far exceeding anything available during World War II. However, the tactical principles underlying continuous turning remain fundamental to modern air combat training. Pilots flying F-16, Fighting Falcons, F-18 Super Hornets, and F-22 Raptors practice variations of Milan's techniques adapted for supersonic performance and beyond visual range combat scenarios. The influence extends beyond military aviation to civilian aerobatic competition and demonstration flying. Pilots performing advanced aerobatic sequences employ continuous maneuvering principles to create visually impressive displays while maintaining safe flight parameters. The smooth transitions and unpredictable sequences that characterize modern aerobatic performances reflect tactical concepts originally developed for aerial combat survival. Flight training curricula at military academies worldwide include historical case studies of Milan's tactical innovations as examples of how individual creativity can influence broader strategic outcomes. Students learn that technical superiority alone cannot guarantee tactical success, and that innovative thinking remains essential for overcoming apparent disadvantages. The lessons emphasize adaptability and initiative as enduring requirements for military aviation success. Modern fighter pilot training incorporates sophisticated simulation systems that can recreate the tactical challenges Milan faced during the Battle of Britain. Student pilots practice continuous turning techniques against computer-generated opponents programmed to replicate German tactical capabilities. These exercises demonstrate how historical innovations remain relevant despite technological advances that have transformed aerial warfare capabilities. The development of unmanned aerial vehicles has created new applications for continuous maneuvering principles. Drone operators employ unpredictable flight patterns derived from Milan's techniques to avoid interception by enemy air defense systems. The fundamental concept of denying opponents stable tracking solutions applies equally to remotely piloted aircraft operating in contested airspace, where predictable routing could result in mission failure or aircraft loss. Malan's personal combat record reflected the effectiveness of his tactical innovations. He achieved 27 confirmed victories, 7 shared destroyed, 3 probably destroyed, and 16 damaged during his active flying career. More importantly, his survival rate was exceptional among Battle of Britain pilots, demonstrating that aggressive tactics combined with intelligent evasion could achieve superior results without accepting unnecessary risks. The continuous turning technique required specific aircraft characteristics that made the Spitfire ideally suited for its implementation. The aircraft's elliptical wings provided excellent maneuverability at moderate speeds, while the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine delivered sufficient power to maintain energy during sustained maneuvering. German aircraft designed for high-speed performance often struggled to match Spitfire turning capabilities, particularly at altitudes below 20,000 feet. Training in continuous turning demanded fundamental changes to RAF pilot instruction programs. Student pilots learned to maintain spatial awareness during complex maneuvering sequences while tracking multiple aircraft and managing weapon systems. The cognitive workload was significantly higher than traditional formation flying, requiring exceptional mental discipline and physical conditioning. Only the most skilled pilots could implement the technique effectively under combat stress. The technique's effectiveness was enhanced by Milan's emphasis on situational awareness and tactical communication. Pilots using continuous turning maintained constant radio contact with squadron mates, sharing target information and coordinating attacks to maximize tactical advantages. This communication discipline enabled individual aircraft to maintain unpredictable flight paths while contributing to coordinated squadron operations. German recognition of British tactical innovations led to significant changes in Luftwaffe training and operational procedures. Fighter pilot schools began emphasizing deflection, shooting against maneuvering targets, rather than traditional formation attacks against straight-flying opponents. These changes acknowledged that British tactical evolution had fundamentally altered the nature of aerial combat over Europe. The broader strategic implications of Milan's innovations contributed to British victory during the Battle of Britain by improving pilot survival rates and combat effectiveness simultaneously. Traditional tactics had achieved acceptable results against bomber formations, but proved inadequate against modern fighter opposition. Milan's techniques enabled British pilots to compete successfully against experienced German aircrew using superior equipment and proven tactical doctrine. Post-war analysis by military historians and aviation experts confirmed that Milan's tactical innovations represented a genuine revolution in fighter combat methodology. The continuous turning technique became a standard element of jet fighter pilot training during the Cold War era, adapted for high-performance aircraft operating at speeds and altitudes far beyond World War II capabilities. Modern fighter pilots still employ variations of Milan's principles when engaging in close-range aerial combat. Milan's influence extended beyond purely tactical considerations to encompass leadership philosophy and training methodology. His emphasis on individual initiative within disciplined organizational structures became a model for military aviation units worldwide. The balance between personal responsibility and collective effectiveness that characterized his approach influenced fighter squadron operations throughout the 20th century. The recognition of Milan's contributions to British victory included immediate awards for exceptional service and long-term acknowledgement of his tactical innovations. He received the Distinguished Flying Cross twice and the Distinguished Service Order twice, reflecting both his personal combat achievements and his contributions to fighter command effectiveness. These decorations recognized not only his individual success, but also his influence on British tactical development. Milan's post-war career included continued service with the RAF, until 1946, followed by return to South Africa, where he became involved in anti-apartheid political activities. His wartime experience defending democratic principles against authoritarian aggression influenced his subsequent opposition to racial discrimination in his home country. The same courage and innovation that characterized his flying career marked his political activities during the 1950s and 60s. The legacy of Malan's tactical innovations continues to influence modern aerial warfare through principles that transcend specific technological capabilities. The emphasis on unpredictability, individual initiative, and adaptive tactics remains relevant in contemporary air combat training programs. Modern fighter pilots study Malan's techniques as examples of how innovative thinking can overcome apparent disadvantages through superior tactical implementation. On August 11, 1940, squadron leader Sailor Malan had demonstrated that a supposedly stupid maneuver could make a Spitfire untouchable by proving that continuous turning created defensive advantages that exceeded any tactical disadvantages. His rejection of rigid formation, flying in favor of adaptive tactics, revolutionized aerial combat and contributed decisively to British victory during the Battle of Britain. The South African merchant seaman who brought maritime weather reading skills to aerial warfare had proven that unconventional approaches could achieve extraordinary results when implemented by skilled practitioners. His continuous turning technique became the foundation for modern fighter tactics that continue to emphasize unpredictability and individual initiative as essential elements of aerial combat success. The stupid maneuver had become the tactical innovation that changed the course of aerial warfare forever.